Hey guys, thanks for joining me for another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video. Today we're going to do a should you poll on Noel and Enna Kros. These essentially have been confirmed in the game. In one of the notices they mentioned like Enna Kros getting a rework in there, so we know for sure that this is what's coming. So in this video we're going to talk about the banners, but I do like to go beyond just like the two main characters. I do like to talk about like any spheres you might be looking out for, maybe the calls, and if the side characters are worth it in any way, right? So let's go ahead and start talking about spheres. I think on Noel's banner, there's pretty two significant spheres. Noel himself, you could argue, is possibly the best ace sphere in the game, if not one of the best. It's a very easy trigger, and it's a 15% attack up. Incredibly good on, like, most characters. On, like, a ton of characters, I remember he's, like, best in slot. So, Noel would be a really good one if you are summoning here to, like, hold on to as many extra EXs as possible. And I'm not going to lie, I'm tempted to summon on here to actually get Noel Spheres because he's a character I've skipped out on pretty much every time he's come around. I might pull here at least with tickets to just like get his kit through FR and then get hopefully some EXs along the way because it's a sphere I've been lacking and I really want some of those, right? And I do think it is actually the type of sphere worth chasing, especially if you are a player just with like a ton of resources and tickets. I do think it's actually worth it to go tickets here to get some Noel EXs if you're lacking that, right? And then I would say Bosch's Lulu's is like a Max Brave, I Brave, nothing too crazy, but I think Bosch is notable for a B sphere. It's not one you're going to need a lot, but it is a really nice attack up, but you have to take HP damage. So this has to be for a tank where you know they're taking HP damage. So like an Oron or Rubicante maybe could make some use out of that one for sure. So it's not one you need a ton of, but it is one that's worth like holding on to, maybe an extra copy or two in case that tank comes along that you want that attack up, right? And then the other banner for spheres, Thancred's is notable just because it is an aura poison. It is a weakness damage trigger. So like I think Ferris is the easier poison to trigger, but Thancred, like poison spheres are kind of cool. And to be honest, Thancred's sphere is probably the best thing about him. Everything else about him, his call, his kit, like he's just terrible. Like he's a pretty god awful unit. But his sphere, I would say, is his one like shining thing. Now, hopefully, and I've theorized this, that whenever they do decide to give him his BTFR, they're just going to make him like a god. They're going to make him like the best unit in the game. They have to do it for the memes because Thancred has been, he's never really been good in the game, to be honest. Like, I can't think of a time where it's like, wow, I really need Thancred. He's always been pretty bad, right? Prompto's Ace Spheres, like, it's kind of an average solid one. I think it's Attack Eye Brave. Pretty easy trigger, but you're getting attack, right? So any Ace Sphere with attack is definitely worth holding on to a little bit. And then Enna Kros, I'm trying to remember. I think hers might be attack Eye Brave too, but hers was like weakness damage trigger, so it's all right. Honestly, for spheres, like the Enna Kros banner isn't really that crazy, but I would say like between Noel and Bosch, like those are actually some pretty solid spheres there, right? Now, in terms of LD calls, Lulu is actually quite significant as an LD call because she's one of the few fire enchant calls in the game, and not only is it a party fire enchant, but I do believe she gets the true fire enchant, which means you can enchant characters that have elements, which is incredibly useful if you want to, you know, get by some type of mission where fire damage is very important, but you don't want to carry fire damage in the party. And an example, like, so in Lufenia era, it would be like help with an orb. In today's era, it would be if you had a boss with a condition that was deal force damage while dealing fire damage, bam, Lulu Call can do that without actually having a fire damage dealer, you know, FR user in the party, right? Bosch, his call is interesting because it does make you very tanky. I think it's got like a lot of like brave damage reduction on it, so it definitely like can be solid. And then it also has locking, right? And locking is actually very good on calls. I've said this before, but there are certain characters that can evade or maybe tank in certain ways that don't actually have lock on their own. I think the most significant place I've used this is for characters like Kain and Freya that jump in the air. They are not lock characters, but lock is really good on them because when they're floating up in the air, the enemies will attack their empty space and they will miss. So there are definitely times where lock calls can be very good when you want a certain character to be attacked and they don't have lock in their kit. So I think Bosch's call, I don't think it's worth like chasing the call if you're not planning to go in on the banner, but like his call for locking it's usable, right? And then we go over here and Thancred's call, nothing really worth it there. Prompto's is interesting because, like, Rydia's call is way better, but Prompto's is interesting where one of the calls will, like, give the caller, like, 100% evade and lock, but it's, like, very short turn duration. So it sounds really cool, but it's there's just better calls. Like Raijin and Rydia are just superior to that. But sure, Prompto, if you don't have the other ones, if you want to get like a little one-turn single evade, it's not even a party evade, I think it's just the caller. But they would have a little evade lock for like one turn. But nothing too crazy there, right? And Enna Crow's call, I don't remember being that significant or crazy. I think it maybe had like the Dark and Peril on it or something, but nothing too crazy, right? So in terms of calls, I mean, I would say Lulu's probably the best call here just for that fire enchant, right? And then, yeah, I think Noel's call just was like stats, like just normal stats, so nothing too crazy, right? So now the part you want to know about is, should we actually summon for the characters? Now, these banners are kind of interesting. These are very heavy DPS focused banners in terms of Enna, Crow, and Noel, right? And I suppose let's start with Noel here. Both characters are getting reworks. They're both getting Echo. I think Enna Crow's getting BT for the first time. Noel already had it. What I'm going to say for... Well, we'll start with the side characters, I suppose. Lulu is trash. Bosch can be a solid tank. The only thing I don't like about Bosch is he's mainly like an AoE tank. He does better in AoE fights. What he does is when the party takes AoE damage, he absorbs it all into himself, and he has a bunch of like reductions and stuff. Just, you know, typical tank stuff, but like Gladio, like there are other characters that I feel like even for budget LD only options I would like over Bosch, right? Like Gladio, Edge, like even 8, like to some extent, like these dodge tanks, I kind of like them better than Bosch. So I really wouldn't worry about Lulu or Bosch. Now, if you're going to summon here, it's because you want Noel, or if you want to go for tickets for a Sphere like I am, I think I'm going to do that actually. Noel is actually going to be a very good damage dealer, and he's really good for players that like the no-turn strats where you're like doing a ton of delay. Now, Noel himself doesn't delay, but he's very similar to like Aranea and Lightning, where like he can do a lot of like on-demand breaking, like pretty much whenever he wants. The thing that's really cool about him is, I believe it's his FR, makes it so that every party member does break instantly on it. Like they unbreak and break with every attack they do. So you can think of it this way: when you're Noel's FR, it kind of turns the entire party into Aranea, which is insane because when everybody in the party is breaking every single time, it's kind of like you can think of it as having like a Sephiroth BT effect up, right? Where you're just breaking constantly. And those of you that have used Sephiroth BT effect know that you are delaying these enemies into oblivion. Like they will not get attacks in. Now, the one weakness of this, and it happens once in a while, where bosses cannot be broken. They might have a brave floor, or the bosses do something where they make you do 1 brave damage and it makes them very hard to break. Like things like that can kind of hold Noel back a lot. So it may be rare, but there are fights where Noel is really not good in. So you just have to be careful about that. Or like a fight that might punish you for taking too many turns in a row. They haven't done that as much lately, but they did do that quite a bit in like Lufenia era, where they punished you for taking too many turns in a row. But Noel, he's going to deal really fat numbers. His big attack is his like EX, and I think it does like 13 dumps or something like that. Like it's pretty nasty. And his BT basically makes it so you get the EX spam. You can just use it over and over and over again, right? So if you want to use Noel as your main damage dealer, I mean, getting his BT I think is going to be important because you do want to spam that EX and do a bunch of damage. Now, should you pull for Noel? Now, here's the thing. If you're an established veteran that already has plenty of DPS options, you definitely don't need him, right? Because I always go back to Astos, right? If you have Astos and you're a player that just likes to make the fight as easy as possible, why would you ever not use Astos, right? You're only going to make it harder for yourself. So, like, Astos is always going to be your main DPS, and there's then a plethora of other characters, like, I would say Aranea, Sephiroth, like, these other characters, I'm even going to throw Lena out there, that are going to be on a very high DPS level. So, DPS characters are a little bit more dime a dozen. They come around a lot more. So the question you need to ask yourself is, am I lacking a DPS? Now, for like newer to mid-range players, if you feel like you're lacking a really good DPS option, you maybe miss Astos, he definitely can be a good pickup. For veterans, what I would say is this: if you previously fully built him, it is so worth it to go in and get the FR, because he is going to be a great asset, especially in lockout content for things like that. But if you're someone that's a veteran with an established box and you're maybe building him kind of fresh, like you don't already have the BT, I think he's very skippable, to be honest. So it's going to depend on your account and what your situation is. But if you don't really need a DPS and you don't already have his BT, I think you probably would be safe to skip here, right? But once again, if you've got him fully built already with BT, it's pretty much, I would say, any of these returning characters that have BTs, if you've previously built them, because I even said this for like Bartz, who, let's be honest, Bartz is kind of trash. I still thought he was worth it for me to ticket his FR, because you can usually pretty easily ticket that FR within, 200 to 300 tickets. which isn't going to break the bank, and it's just adding another fully built character to your roster with Echo. I think in that alone, it's worth it. It's when you're talking about, if this is a zero invested character, do I really want to go in and get the BT and all that stuff? I don't think he's worth chasing gems for his BT right now. I think there's other DPSs that are better than him. I think characters like Lena and Kelger are a lot more meta defining. They're way more worth your resources, right? So once again, it's just going to depend on where you're at. And what we always say in DFFOO, if a character is your favorite, definitely go for him. Noel is a very good damage dealer, so I'm not saying he's bad in any way. We just, when I do these should you polls, it's in terms of the meta, longevity, where should we put our highest priority, and I don't think Noel is the highest priority, right? All right, let's go to the next one, which is Enna Kros. So we've got Prompto and we've got Thancred. Prompto he's solid as an LD only character. He's got some dodge shenanigans. He can do like double attacks and things like that, but he's once again not somebody you should be chasing. But I think you could, like, the fact that he's got that evasion, you definitely could get use out of him in a budget situation. Thancred is trash, like the worst character in the game, like flat out. So yeah, definitely don't worry about them. So side characters, I'd say on both banners, not really worth worrying about. Unless you're thinking about maybe calls or like trying to get EXs for spheres like that, like I talked about. Now, Enna Kros, I mean, she does get a very nice upgrade here. I have always said that Enna Kros is going to be very good when she gets her BT and she can kind of navigate her own BT phase, throw out those big Omega attacks like crazy. If you're not familiar with her, what makes her very interesting is she has some normal attacks that do kind of like okay damage. I think she's got a little bit of delay in there too. I think with her EX delays, or deletes turns, I believe. But the big thing is like her LD like does this humongous Omega attack, and I think her 35 does as well. It's based on her overhead, but it like multiplies her stats like an insane amount. So what happens is with her Omega got out, she can put up some really crazy numbers, and I would say like pre-Astos, she was like kind of one of these first characters that kind of did some insane numbers that you weren't expecting. Like, to put it in perspective, her last rework was a pretty darn long time ago. And it was when characters weren't doing insane damage, and I was able to put up like 60 mil with her. And this has got to be, what, a year plus ago? Like a really long time ago, she was doing 60 million damage, which is insane, because that's like right now, a character doing 60 mil in an attack is actually still pretty good. She was doing it a long time ago, right? So with her upgrades and everything, I mean, she is going to be able to put up pretty big numbers. And I've said this before, I feel like she's going to feel very similar to Astos to play. In that it's the type of character that you want to build around a little bit. You want to give a lot of supports. Brave gain characters really help with her. Characters that maybe make you either retain or just give you brave in between HP attacks. I think Ursula is a character that comes up that's very nice with her. Like these brave enhancing characters really help, because when her numbers are all amplified, she's doing all these dumps. Being able to give her that giant chunks of brave back to do more HP damage is really, really helpful. So she's a character where I would say kind of a selfish damage dealer. Her BT effect does help the party a lot more now. Like it does this thing where it rounds up the last 5 numbers of your damage. Essentially what you can think of it, it's kind of like adding extra true HP damage, which is always a good thing, right? She enchants your party for element, does weakness damage, like all that kind of stuff, and then you're going to get normal BT buffs with her, which is really nice. I think the BT is a nice upgrade to her, because prior to that, she was just a super selfish damage dealer that didn't really do much for the party, and you focused on supporting her. Now, I think you're still going to treat her the same. You're going to support her, make her the focus, try to set up like a huge Unga Bunga BT phase with her, very much like how you would with Astos, and put up some numbers. So what I'm going to be curious to see is I want to try to do a new character guide on her. I want to see what her damage looks like. Now, I'm not planning to go for her BT, but if I luck it, I'll definitely we'll use her BT and try it out. What I'm going to say is I think her damage is going to be insane. I don't think it's going to be as good as Astos. I think it's going to be somewhere kind of in the middle. But I think her damage should be better than your average really good damage dealer if you support her right and treat her properly. And what I kind of said earlier in a previous video, it kind of feels like having maybe a secondary Astos type character on your roster. So like if you're doing lockout content and you are already used to Astos and you want someone else who can just deal some really heavy numbers in a big force time BT phase, Enna Kros might be a decent pickup, but it's kind of, she's really in the same place as Noel, right? In the end, they're both damage dealers. So once again, if you don't need a damage dealer, both banners I think are actually skippable. Enna Kros previously didn't have a BT, so like I would be an example of a player. I have her fully built even with blue armor and FR, like all done. but all I need is the BT. And is it worth me putting in gems on this banner just for the BT? Honestly, I don't think it is, right? And if you're a new player, is it worth going in here? I would say probably not. And I would say if you're a new player that's looking for like your first DPS, I would actually favor Noel over her. I feel like Noel just has more utility and is really busted with like letting your party break the enemy's back. I think it's going to make the fights a lot easier. You don't have to deal with mechanics. Enna Kros, you kind of have to have like really good supports to put behind her, whereas I think Noel's a little bit more self-sufficient, and you can plug and play him in the teams a little bit more easily. So I'd say if you're a player that's looking for a DPS and you're choosing one or the other, I would actually recommend Noel, I think. But both are going to be very good damage dealers, right? So just depends. I would say overall the banners are skippable if you want to skip them. I think if you see yourself with a reason to summon or a character is your favorite, they're going to be very good. If you build them up, they will be great. So anyways, you guys let me know what you are going to do on the banners. My plan is Enna Kros, I'm just going to do free pulls. Noel, I think I am going to jump in with tickets to get some spheres. And then if I get lucky and get some other pieces, we'll take it, right? So let me know what you think of these characters. Let me know if you're hyped for these banners. These are going to come out in about a day from the time I'm recording this. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching. We'll catch y'all on the next one.